If you're a watch enthusiast, you've certainly heard about the 10-year-long battle between ETA, the Swiss mechanical movements manufacturer owned by the Swatch Group, and COMCO, which is Switzerland's competition commission. If not, here's a quick recap. It all started in 2009 when Nicholas Hayek, the chairman of the Swatch Group, said that he would stop selling ETA movements to most third-party companies. Now, why would a company stop selling movements and willingly leave money on the table? For Mr. Hayek, it was a question of principles. He was tired of seeing fashion brands with absolutely no horology knowledge get into the watch game and start selling tons of watches without knowing anything about it. For him, the only people that deserved ETA movements were companies that were actively investing in the manufacture of either watches or movements. At that time, ETA had around 90% of the market share for Swiss mechanical movements. So COMCO was forcing them to sell their movements to pretty much any third-party buyers that wanted to, because refusing those sales would pretty much disrupt the market because there would be a shortage. In 2010, Hayek asked COMCO for a ruling which would allow ETA to refuse the sales of their movements to most third-party companies. Mostly non-manufacturing ones, as I said. COMCO started to do a review of the Swiss mechanical movements market, and for a good 2.5 years they did an analysis, which in 2013 they finally gave their decision. They were willing to give ETA's right of refusal of sales, but under very strict conditions. The two parties put together a plan in which ETA would gradually start limiting the sales of their movements to third-party buyers. They would have to reduce their supplies to 75% through 2015, then 65% through 2017, 55% through 2019, and starting January 1st, 2020, they would have the right to refuse the sale or to sell to any third-party companies that they wish. Also, this agreement stated that they could only sell for 2013 to 2019. ETA could only sell movements to a select list of third-party companies. For these chosen companies, they had quotas to fill. So they were obligated to fill these quotas and produce a minimum number of movements. But the buyers didn't have the obligation to buy these movements. So as you'll see later on, this created a few disagreements here and there. Everything went smoothly with this agreement, and ETA was filling their quotas with absolutely no problems up until 2015 and 2016, where the Chinese markets, which were huge consumers of ETA movements, well, they had a big slowdown in their market. And paired with this slowdown, the Swiss franc was extremely expensive. So many international buyers started questioning whether or not it was worth it to actually buy ETA movements instead of getting a cheaper Miyota alternative or something like that. These two factors combined hit ETA like a ton of bricks. For 2017, one of their buyers, which had a quota of 800,000 units, only ordered 75,000 calibers. And another buyer, which was supposed to buy 125 movements, bought none. So at this point, ETA still had the production capacity to build another 1.5 million movements, but they had no one to sell them to. So they went to COMCO and they did a complete 180. Now, instead of asking to stop the sale of their movements to third-party companies, they were now asking if they could sell these movements to third-party companies that were not in the 2013 agreement. To this request, COMCO answered with a cold, hard no. For them, allowing ETA to sell to anyone would literally put the nail in the coffin of their smaller competitors, which were also facing the same problem that ETA was. From then on, the Swatch Group kept asking COMCO to review the 2013 agreement, which was hurting them a lot. And they also always said that this was a very urgent situation because these movement manufacturers have to take orders 1 year in advance. So as long as COMCO didn't give a decision as to know if they could or not sell to other third-party companies, they had to wait at least a year after that decision before they could get any more sales. So this was a very urgent situation, but COMCO didn't respond with urgency at all, which created a lot of hate from the Hayek family, and the whole Swatch Group were really pissed at COMCO. So they kept asking for a prompt decision, and COMCO simply didn't want to move too fast. So they caught a lot of flack from both ETA and other watch companies, mostly potential customers that couldn't get their movements because there was no decision. And even non-watch related Swiss businesses were against COMCO, because if they did this to ETA, they could do it to any other business. So COMCO received a lot of hate during this time. They said they were slow to act because they had three main concerns which they needed to assess. Number one, by lifting these restrictions, ETA could now completely stop selling movements to third-party companies, which was their initial intentions. And this would cause a shortage in the market because their competitors just didn't have enough production capacity, so people would be left without movements. Their second concern was that ETA could go the complete opposite way and start flooding the market and sell their movements to pretty much anyone that wants one, which was the greatest concern according to COMCO, because this would completely destroy their competition, because ETA movements are about as cheap as the competition. So if watchmakers have to choose between a Sellita or an ETA movement for the same price, they will certainly switch over to ETA because it has much better brand recognition and it would sell their watches a bit easier. The third concern of COMCO was that at this point, the competitors were only really cloning ETA movements. They were not producing their own variation or their own alternatives, so the market didn't have any real diversity. You either had ETA movements or ETA clones. COMCO finally started their review of the market in 2018 to assess these preoccupations that they had. COMCO's review process went on for about 2 years, up until 7 days before January 1st, 2020, the date which restrictions were supposed to be lifted for ETA. COMCO announced that these restrictions were extended to December 31st, 2020, so a whole nother year. They said that they simply didn't have time to review the market because the market had changed so much between 2013 and 2019. So once again, ETA was furious after this decision and created a lot of hate for COMCO once again, as ETA was in the complete darkness about when or if they could sell to other third-party companies. This uncertainty went on for another 7 months, up until July 15, 2020. On this date, COMCO finally revealed their 20,000 pages review of the Swiss mechanical movements market, in which they had interviewed over 200 watchmakers and movement manufacturers, and their decision was quite simple. The Swiss mechanical movements market was now competitive enough, and ETA's restrictions are lifted. In their analysis, they did a few major findings. Number one, the demand for Swiss-made mechanical movements just isn't as high as it was in 2013. The shortage problem isn't there anymore. Their second finding is that ETA competitors like Sellita, Ronda, Soprod, and STP have increased their production both in quantity and quality. Also, the most important competitor, which is Sellita, now offers comparable movements when it comes to the price, quality, quantity, etc. In 2019, Sellita sold 60% of the market's share for Swiss mechanical movements. ETA sold 30% of the movements on the market, whereas the remaining 10% was shared between the other competitors. Those numbers can be a bit misleading though, because ETA was still by large the biggest producer of Swiss mechanical movements, because they might have only sold 500,000 units to third-party consumers, but they produced 5.5 million movements for the Swatch Group itself. The fourth and final major finding of this research was that some buyers, instead of looking at alternatives, simply started building their own in-house movements, which was the goal since the beginning of this 10-year-long battle. So, as of July 15, 2020, ETA is now free to sell or refuse to sell to any third-party companies that they'd like. However, they still have a dominant position in the market, so they're subject to the rules of conduct. This means that they cannot abuse their dominant position. But this is a statement that's very open for interpretation, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see other debates between COMCO and ETA in the future. But for now, everything is good. But what does this ruling mean for us consumers? Well, one of two things can happen. One, ETA could stick to their original plans and stop selling their movements to third-party companies. This would mean that you could only get ETA movements on Swatch brands, which include Hamilton, Rado, Longines, Certina, etc. But other companies like micro brands and such would now have to go the Sellita route, or maybe go for a Japanese alternative like Miyota, or hopefully they might start creating their own in-house movements, which would be a great thing for the watch community. The second thing that could happen is that ETA might go the complete opposite way and start selling their movements to pretty much anyone that wants to get one, which would make ETA movements even more ubiquitous than they already are, and it would certainly drive a few competitors to bankruptcy. I'd be interested if you guys let me know in the comments below what you think is the most probable scenario. Will ETA stop selling to third-party companies, or will they start flooding the market and we will see them everywhere? So let me know what you guys think. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you around next time.